morning. Welcome to Undisputed. I'm Jenny Taft with Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp. Hope you guys had a great weekend. How are we doing today?
Jenny, I am doing fine. We learned more and more watching The Last Dance last night. I want to see Skip Bayless how he finagles his way out of this one.
Oh, really? Well, I would like to offer my condolences to my partner, Shannon Sharp. R.I.P. your LeBron GOAT debate. It's over.
Skip, stop. It is not over. It is not over. You're right, it's not, because LeBron going to play till he like another 3-4 years and be on the top of his game. So you're right, it's not over. Create more distance, though.
It's not over. It is not over, and I don't know about you guys. I just do not want The Last Dance to ever end. So much good stuff. And the latest episodes that we watched last night really showcased just how competitive and tough of a leader Michael Jordan really was. It also recapped the story of MJ and Steve Kerr getting into a physical altercation, throwing punches during a practice. Just hearing them two talk about it was really interesting. Shannon, in your opinion, was Michael Jordan a bully or a leader?
You know what? I wrote down some things last night, Skip, and I think it's twofold. I think two things can be true, and you've heard me say that so many times. Skip, I believe Mike was a leader, obviously being the best player on the team. That normally gives you that, but I think people look at him and saw how hard he worked. Basketball was the most important thing to him. It was the only thing that really mattered to him. But he was also a bully. Skip, when I look back at it, I don't believe Michael Jordan fought Steve Kerr or some of these other guys that he got into it with to make sure or to see if they can make shots in the fourth quarter. I believe he did what he did to see if they were tough enough, he could count on them to be around in the fourth quarter. Because, Skip, for the most part, he was going to have the ball in his hand, and he was going to do what was necessary in order for them to win the ball game. He was kind of controlling the chess pieces on the board. So he wanted to make sure, you know what? I believe, and like Steve Kerr said, and it changed, Skip, he did a lot of things to see how much respect he could garner. And I'm not so sure to this day he has a whole lot of respect for Scotty Burrell. Now, he'll say, oh, Scotty's a great guy. But you hear him say it in the documentary, Skip, he gained a newfound level of respect for Steve Kerr. Not that Steve Kerr beat him or anything, but he was the smallest man on the court, and he stood up for himself. Mike says, I can count on him now. Will Purdue, I can count on him now. He did a lot of things to see, Skip, whether or not he was going to be able to trust these guys in the fourth quarter. Not necessarily if they were going to be able to make a shot, but can I trust you? John did a lot of the same things, Skip, but he wasn't a yeller. He wasn't a cursor, and he definitely wasn't getting into a physical confrontation. But basketball stars and football stars, Skip, you and I both know entirely different. The quarterback, Pat Mahomes, is not going to challenge anybody to a fist fight. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Elway, Marino, they were not going to challenge guys to a fist fight. But Jordan could. But for me, Skip, for us to sit here and say that's the only style, and you see, Skip, at the end, this was the most emotional that we saw Mike, because Mike has been reading the articles. And a lot of the articles, 60, 70% of them, said Michael Jordan was a bully. And Mike has been reading that. And he said something very interesting, Skip. He said, you might want to say I was a tyrant. Okay, fine, that's whatever. But these guys, they won, and it got us to what we wanted to be. But if you don't like that style, don't use that style. He's saying, look, this is the way I did it. Not saying that it's right or wrong, but we won. Skip, we got to be very, very careful doing this, because a lot of times when we have success doing things a certain way, we automatically assume that's the only way, and then the ends justify the means. But we won. You got to be careful, because if we're in the workplace and I work with a team and our job is sales, and my boss and the strongest guy in the group, and all he does is berate me, but my sales are up, he can say, but look at you. You're top in sales. You would have never done that without it. Nah, bro. Nah. So just be careful with that, Skip. The end doesn't necessarily justify the means, but they did win. It'll be very interesting. There are a lot of guys that say, it worked, and I respect Mike, but I believe there are a lot of other guys that it didn't work on, and then I'm not so sure they have the same level of respect for Mike as some of the other guys. but in this situation, it did work. Well, it started working in 91. Was he not that type of leader in 84, 85, 86 through 90? What transpired, Skip? What happened? Why didn't they win like 14 titles?
Is it my turn?
It's your turn,
Okay.
yeah.
Here I go. It obviously took him a while to take over the team. He obviously went through Doug Collins as a coach and then eased into the Phil Jackson regime. I still say that Doug Collins could have won just as many championships as Phil Jackson, because once Michael grew up and took over, he took over the head coaching duties also. Michael Jordan, as you saw last night, was simply the greatest leader/motivator ever there was. There's never been anything like that force of nature you saw last night. And Shannon, I warned you going into this. I was there in 1998. I was the columnist for the Chicago Tribune. I saw it from the inside out. I saw much of this in action, and I told you and warned you going in, it wasn't the prettiest. It could be heartless. He could be ruthless. He could be cold-blooded. He could be all those things that would add up to being a bully, except that there was always method to the madness. And when I say madness, I'm talking about angry, driven, rage-filled madness to win basketball championships. No one has ever wanted to win at any cost the way this guy did. So it wasn't just being a bully for bully's sake. It wasn't just bullying because you're a bad guy and you can get away with it. He always had a plan of attack on every one of his teammates, and he treated each teammate very differently. He did not try to bully Scottie Pippen because he knew right away Scottie's abilities were on par with Michael's. They weren't in Michael's league, but they were at least the second best set of skills on the team. But when he saw other players, such as we talked last week about Horace Grant, he saw a weakness in Horace, in which Horace wasn't as fiery and focused on a nightly basis as he needed to be, and he was going to attack the weakness and try to make it a strength for the playoffs. He attacked the weakness of Scott Burrell, and I saw it day after day. He was relentlessly ruthless to the point of being cold-blooded, cold-hearted on Scott Burrell.
Bullying.
And Scott Burrell took it. He took it and took it. And Michael went so far last night in the doc to say, I tried to get him to fight me in a good way, as in practice fight me, as in, okay, let's do it right here, right now. And Scott Burrell wasn't made of that kind of stuff. But he toughened him up enough that there was one key game in that 98 playoff run, and it was Game 3 at New Jersey. I was there at courtside that night, and that place was going berserk. They had played, New Jersey had the Bulls close twice in Chicago, and it was a hellacious barn burner of a game, that Game 3 at New Jersey. Michael went crazy and scored 38, but guess who scored 23 points in 24 minutes in that game? Scott Burrell. He could shoot it. And in a big playoff setting on the road, man, he looked pretty strong to me. He looked mentally tough to me because Michael had helped toughen him up. And I also told you on Friday that a leader like Michael could never show any weakness, even in practice, to his teammates. So in that one fateful practice where Steve Kerr admits he can snap, that he's got the kind of personality where he's patient, but when he snaps, he just goes over the edge. And he admitted that day in practice he snapped, and he punched Michael in the chest. And Michael had been complaining about his tactics to Phil, who had the whistle in his mouth and could call the fouls. And when Phil kept letting Steve Kerr get away with this and that and this and that, and he had been warned by Michael, Michael just popped him right in the eye. But to Michael's credit, he said he got in his car after he showered, and he started thinking, I just beat up the littlest guy on the floor. I can't do that. So he called back to the Berto Center and got Steve Kerr's number, called him, talked it through with him. And Steve Kerr and the doc said, in a weird way, it was the greatest thing that ever happened because I stood up to Michael Jordan and I won his respect. And Michael said in the documentary, he won my respect. So now Michael could trust Steve Kerr to be able to take and make huge shots in huge NBA Finals games because they were on the same wavelength, because there was mutual respect that Michael had forged in practice steel with exchanging punches. Yep, he exchanged punches with Will Perdue. Vanderbilt University's Will Perdue was 7 feet tall, and Will Perdue was strong, and he said, let's not get this wrong. He was an a-hole. He could be a jerk. He crossed the line numerous times, said Will Perdue in the documentary, but in the end, he was a hell of a teammate, because Will Perdue said when you stand back from it and you let the smoke clear, you realize that he had a purpose to all this, and you realize that they went 6-0 in the finals and he won 6 MVPs. He never asked any of those guys to do anything he wasn't doing. And I love the one big money quote last night, Shannon, was that he said, my mentality was to go out and win at any cost. And if you don't want to live with that regimented mentality, then you don't need to be alongside me. He was basically saying it's my way or the highway. And he wanted you to get to the same level that he was. And if you don't get to the same level, he said, it's going to be hell for you. And it was hell for a lot of those guys,